The return of Rich Rod. I like it. That's Mountaineer Paul, locked on West Virginia. Paul, do you like Rich Rodriguez being back with the Mountaineers?
Brother, I don't know if there's a word, but if it's more than like, that's the word. We're ecstatic. This couldn't have turned out any better. It was 11 days of agony, of Pat McAfee hints, of just everything. I feel like we missed the window the last couple of days to really announce it live on his show, which is what Pat wanted to do, which brings us so much money and just exposure in general. But I'm imagining that's going to happen tomorrow. As far as just, this is a redemption story, Disney-esque proportions. This is a guy that admits that he made a huge mistake 17 years ago going to Michigan, where he just didn't fit. He's too hard-edged of a coach. These five-star kids, they had options at West Virginia. When you were 2.5-star kids, you can coach them a little harder, especially back in those days. And he brought that to Michigan. It just was not a fit. So they ran him off inside of 3 years. Didn't even get to the end of his third year, so less than 3 years. 20 players transferred in the second year. A lot of people think he's a bad coach. He's really not. He just didn't get a chance. And he's had one of only 3 10-win seasons in Arizona history. And now he's flipped an FCS program into a group of 5 power.
Yeah, I think the fit component can be overblown, but not in every instance. Brian Harsin, for example, is the head coach at Boise State after Chris Peterson went to Washington, and he does really, really well.
Yeah.
And then he goes down to Auburn, and it never clicks.
Not a good fit.
It was, and people could see that. And people have those questions about Kalen DeBoer. I think DeBoer is so good that he's going to make it work. Like 9-3, yeah, disappointing. It is a failure of a season for Alabama in year one. Every season that follows is not going to necessarily be that way. At least I don't see that situation here. But with Rich Rodriguez, I think it's easy to look at it and say, well, they're grasping at the past. They're trying to cling to something that used to be. And I don't see it that way, because since he was last at West Virginia, Paul, number one, this is a completely different looking sport from a roster acquisition standpoint. Right. And number two, he hasn't been out of it. So he understands those changes. He understands the landscape, and he's proven he can still coach. And he's coached at a place that I think, relative to where they've been, was harder than what it is to win at West Virginia. Neil Brown had 9 wins just last season, and they were close to pushing for a conference championship again in 2024. West Virginia, I don't know that they necessarily pop into the conference championship conversation in 2025, but they're at most they're 3 years away, and I think probably they're 2 if you run this thing correctly from being at that spot. Because like you mentioned, Jacksonville State, which is in the state of Alabama, not Florida, for those of you out there, they went FCS to Conference USA, and he just won Conference USA in a blowout title game. I mean, he is still capable of winning in this modern landscape of college football. I think that Jacksonville State job relative to West Virginia in the Big 12 is a tougher place to win, and that's why I like the move.
9 wins down the stretch, right? Like 9 in a row. Like they started out 0-3, real bad. And then he coached them, and they ended up winning, and they beat the better teams on their schedule. Jamie Chadwell, making almost $5 million a year at Liberty, spanked them. They got more resources than almost any team in Group of 5. And here's Jacksonville State, who is on record of having the least resources in Group of 5, winning that time. It was a big statement from him. And then here's kind of the backstory to this. So West Virginia, probably Rich Rod wasn't their first choice. Andy Kotelnicki was probably their first choice.
Yep, he interviewed for the job.
Yeah, and here's why college football is a little broken right now. Bad teams aren't in the playoffs. So when they fire their coaches, good teams are still playing. And who's going to leave a playoff team? Not very many coaches where you're going to be looked at like Rich Rodriguez was. So it kind of sucks. But how it's worked out for us is like this. Ken Kendrick owns the Diamondbacks. He has openly stated, along with Governor Justice and Pat McAfee, West Virginia has a blank check. This is on record, probably in the $8 to $12 million range, NIL and full revenue share. So I could see, because of the way the sport is now, West Virginia coming back a lot quicker than people think.
What are your expectations for how he approaches the transfer portal? Because part of the reason, aggressive. But I just want to say real quick, part of the reason that Kotelnicki is not the head coach is because of the way the calendar is set up, because you have to attack it right now, because
Yeah.
West Virginia is not that far off. West Virginia is not willing to wait. Heck, Oregon hired Dan Lanning when Georgia was in the middle of a national championship run. He was their defensive coordinator, and he just stuck it out there because Oregon felt like he was the right guy after they, couldn't really make it work with Justin Wilcox at Cal, who's an Oregon grad. And I just find that to be another example of, hey, this college football calendar is messed up. It is dumb.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense. And yeah, that might lead to West Virginia not going after their not being able to get their number one target. Because I respect Andy Kotelnicki saying, look, I want to be your head coach, but I'm not leaving this. I got a chance to win a national championship here. And that's not something everybody can say. But now that they have Rich Rodriguez there, the portal is open right now. You feel they'll be aggressive.
Yeah, they're going to go out to probably it's his history. He's going to get a dual threat guy to run this offense. You've already got a freshman All-American who had a really great season this year, in Jaheim White at running back. We all know how good he is. I would love to see him in this Rich Rod offense, but if not, I'm sure we're going to have more than enough to get players this year. That's, we're bottom third of the Big 12 in the last few years under Neil Brown and NIL, and the donors were very loud and clear on this. If you hire, and this is the backstory to this, like I said, Ren Baker may leave over some of this stuff because reports were coming out he was bullied, he was strong-armed. Like the donors said, no, we want Rich Rodriguez in this situation. That's literally how it went. So
and that's the athletic director was strong-armed, do you feel?
That's what a lot of people feel like, yeah. At the end of the day, a lot of candidates fell by the wayside due to the calendar or due to fit, and Rich Rodriguez was still standing at the end. But early reports were like, listen, the donors are throwing a fit right now. Like, they don't want anybody but Rich Rod. They're willing to write a blank check. McAfee's being vocal publicly. Pac-Man Jones yesterday put out a tweet saying, listen, I'll give any DB on West Virginia's team that gets 2 interceptions $100K. Every 2 interceptions, you get $100K. All these donors are like, we've got 2 billionaires and several millionaires that with a total of 6 that stood together and said, and some of these are on the board of governors that said, no, we want Rich Rod against every candidate that he tried to go hire. So there is a backstory to this that we don't know where Ren Baker really sat with all this. My gut feeling was that Rich Rod wasn't his first choice. And I think, I don't know if bullied's a good word, but there was definitely confliction there. Yeah.
Persuaded.
Definitely persuaded. And I think it's going to work out for us in the long run, because this is all about resources, man. And if you give Rich Rodriguez, who has done less or more with less most of his career, a lot of resources, I have no clue what he's capable of.
Do you expect him to be able to win a conference championship at some point?
I do. He's done it before. He just did it. He's a winner, man. He didn't work out at Michigan, but I mean, like I said, he gave Arizona a 10-win year, one of 3 ever. Their other one was just last year. And then obviously he's winning with an FCS roster right now at the Group 5 level. If you give him more resources that he can pick, I truly don't know, because he used to not have anything to work with. It could have, I don't want to say Nick Saban-esque run, like he was 59. By the time he was 69, he had 7 titles. I'm not saying that, but over the course of the next 7 to 8 years, we could probably get a couple Big 12 conference titles. Like, these are the expectations we have right now. And we'll see how it lands after this season. I'm sure we'll adjust that. But in the honeymoon phase, that's where it feels like.